Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here. Welcome to the FigureItOutcast for February 2025. I am your host, Adam Koralik, and of course, this is a Patreon-backed podcast where Patreon backers get early access to it pretty much immediately, as well as early access to all my videos. And I appreciate anybody considering going over there to support, where you can get early access to videos, you can get shout-outs, you can pick subjects, and you can even be on the podcast. And speaking of that, our first guest, welcome back, Abdullah. How are you doing?
Doing well. Happy to be back at the podcast with some interesting subjects.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have some fun. He and I were just kind of chit-chatting, and we were discussing, like, logistically speaking, we hadn't actually talked to each other since the end of December, so it's been like a month and a half. But that's because we had to record the January episode at the end just for scheduling reasons. But yeah, it's nice to talk to you. But yeah, let's go ahead and get on with it. You want to go?
Yep.
Want to start?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right. So as always, because you are a podcast, you are on the podcast, and you get to pick a subject, you got to do that. So you want to talk about what you selected?
Yep. So my topic is Switch 2. Is it, as you phrased it, fortune or failure?
Yeah, I liked that's how I just truncated the whole thing that he basically put out there. But yes, we just want to talk, because honestly, this is the first podcast opportunity we've had to discuss the new system since it was announced. I'll tell my side of that first, but you go ahead since this is yours.
You can go ahead before me.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, okay, yes, the subject is Switch 2, fortune or failure, right? What are we predicting is going to happen here? But the funny thing about it is, like, obviously there was rumors about this forever. We all knew Nintendo was going to make a new piece of hardware. That wasn't really a secret. I think that everybody was calling it Switch 2 just because we didn't know what else to call it. I'm kind of disappointed that that's really the name they went with, but, I mean, at the same time, Nintendo has
They
never
haven't
been
done that
good.
before.
Yeah, well, they haven't put a number on it, but Nintendo has never been good with names. So I'll throw this out there. The first major system, not including like the TV Game 6, which is also a terrible name, by the way, but their first system in Japan had a good name, Famicom, but in the rest of the world, pretty much, well, okay, when I say rest of the world, I mean like North America, Europe. I don't know how you guys handled it, but the NES, just called the Nintendo, which probably created an entire generation to think that the name of the company was the name of a system, and we all have had to deal with that ever since. I never liked that. I thought that was lame. Then the next one, the Super Nintendo. It's like, okay, that's a lame name compared, because you're naming it after your company. You're not naming the actual product. The Nintendo 64. So technically the name of that system is just 64, which is dumb. I will say the GameCube, though, is the only one they ever gave a good name to. That's a legitimate, the Nintendo GameCube. It's the only one where we actually call it by a good name. And then the Wii, which is just a gibberish as a word. Wii U, which is even more of gibberish. Switch, which is not terrible, but it's a word that already meant something. And now we're just sequelizing it, Switch 2. So I found that very disappointing. But that's just you can give your thoughts on that in a bit. But I will say the funny thing about this, though, is even though we all guessed this was going to happen at some point, when it actually got announced, of course, everybody's making videos about it, news on it, whatever. Do you know where I was on this planet when that announcement happened?
Yeah, where were you?
I was on Tinian Island in the Pacific. Tinian Island is only famous for one thing. At the end of World War II, it's where the Enola Gay and the Boxcar took off to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. So, like, the atomic bombs were on that island before they were detonated. That's all it's known for. I was there working on a completely different thing, and then it gets announced, and I was like, oh, man, I guess I should make a video about it. So I did a quick thoughts video standing in front of the atomic bomb pits while holding the Sega Pluto, talking about the Switch 2, because that's just the situation I found myself in. So that was unique. But all the same, you know, I'm genuinely curious, like, what do you think? What do you have to say on the Switch 2?
Still way too early to call whether it's gonna fail or not. I also see that the name wasn't much of a... It wasn't really that big of a of good choice. I would say generally it's better going Switch 2 than what happened with Wii and Wii U. Do you know what I mean?
As in, they only named the Wii U because they wanted to capitalize on the success of the Wii.
Yeah, but and another thing is that 1 and 2 define you can even somebody in general will understand that this is a new thing. It's a Switch 2. It's another system, right?
Right. Because one of the issues with the Wii U was a lot of laymen's thought that it was just an add-on or something.
Yeah, Wii U, something that's an add-on. This one isn't, so that's a positive point. And the other thing is that obviously having backwards compatibility with Switch games is a must-have, or else the console would probably it's not gonna make it. It's unlikely to make it if that's the case. It doesn't. I mean, I think in terms of power, I'm not sure what is known yet, but I don't think it's still on par with the PS5 or a Series X, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's from what we understand, it's mostly like a PS4 Pro.
Yeah, which is decent for Nintendo. I mean, depends. That's when it's docked, right?
I would assume so. We don't have those kinds of details at the
Yeah,
time of this
still.
recording.
Yeah, but if it's in that, it's still that means it's still significant in power. It's not too less or way too low compared to its competitors. Um, I think
It's a generation behind technologically, which is what Nintendo has done since
yeah.
the Wii. I mean, they've effectively been doing this, as depressing as this is about to sound. Dude, this has been Nintendo's policy for nearly 20 years.
Yeah, ever since the Wii, right?
Yeah, which was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, 2000.
That hurt,
Yeah,
didn't
okay,
it?
that's
Yeah.
what 20 years. That's true. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say about it. I mean, one thing when I mentioned the subject to you, I said, "Do you think it's going to be another Wii U?" As I said, it's too early, and we don't know much of the details of the console. Hopefully, it's not another Wii U situation. Uh, you could also, I mean, with the massive user base of the Switch, going to Switch 2, especially if it's backwards compatible, may carry on the momentum of the Switch. It may not sell well as the Switch itself, but who knows? We could also see a PS2 kind of situation here, going from PS1 to PS2 in a similar way. There's not much to say about it. Of course, the launch games would definitely help define how well it is. So, I guess most of this is speculation. But I don't see it
Oh,
going
yeah,
the Wii U route.
largely
Yeah,
going to be speculation.
because
Yeah.
maybe because of the name, as you said, to the layman, the Wii U was like an add-on. But this one, even if somebody doesn't know much, they would understand that this is another console. So this is what I'm guessing would maybe put it in an advantage. And then comes whether it's powerful, not powerful, what are the launch games, what are how the system works, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I hear you. Now, here's the thing. I want to discuss and explain why in greater detail we're discussing this compared to the Wii/Wii U. So to understand a little history here and what pattern emerges, the Wii was a colossal success financially, but largely it did that because it appealed to markets that didn't previously exist, namely your grandmother, your mother, your aunt, your cousin who doesn't usually play video games, your friend's, sister or whatever. Like, people who didn't normally do this were willing to pick up Wiis because they just thought of it as like a silly little party machine. There maybe was some nostalgia thrown in there because it was the emergence of the Wii Shop, which was the first time you were able to, like, legally anyway, download NES games on Nintendo hardware and be like, oh, I remember when I was a kid and I played some of this stuff. It's cool to play it again. Like, it was a different market that existed in a very specific period of time. However, that the Wii U proved that the core fan base of, like, shall we say, true gamers, people who are actually passionate about the hobby, they felt rejected by the Wii. largely because Nintendo openly told us this isn't for you. So we went on and we did things like the 360, the PS3, whatever. So when the Wii U came about, they were trying to appeal to that initial market, only to realize that market didn't have faith for them, or didn't have faith in them. It didn't care about them. It saw them as a temporary amusement machine and nothing more. So the reason the Wii U sold only about 10 million units was their name got them that far. There was some of us that got into it solely because we were into the hobby enough to ignore kind of how we'd been treated by them. But basically the base didn't exist for that system. And that's why they gave up on it relatively quickly. Like, I don't think it was any great secret to those of us who pay attention to video games that Nintendo had more or less admitted within a year or two that the Wii U wasn't going to be around for very long, and technically it was only around for 4, but by like year 2 we already knew that. So that said, they basically created the Switch to kind of replace the Wii U and kind of rebrand completely, while ironically basically making a system that wasn't that much more capable than the Wii U, and also easy to pilfer games from, which is why they were porting everything they'd worked so hard on to bring over to that. And they could kind of present the Switch like the Wii U had never existed. Hey, do you remember Nintendo? Here's our new thing. This is all what it's all about. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember the Wii U. There was a Wii and a GameCube, that's true. But anyway, so now buy this. And the Switch kind of got to become the real Nintendo system for the 8th generation of game consoles, and we just kind of act like the Wii U didn't happen. The concern is, will this happen with the Switch 2? Now, I personally can't say whether or not I think the Switch 2 will be a big hit, but if it does fail, it won't be for that reason. It'll fail for some other reason if it does, but basically, the Switch base isn't just casuals who don't care about stuff. That system has very successfully managed to integrate itself as the other platform. Do you have a PC? Do you have an Xbox? Do you have a PS5? You can have any one of those, but also you need a Switch. That is how they have presented themselves very successfully to everybody. It's got adults, it's got kids, it's got PC gamers, it's got console gamers, it's got portable gamers. It kind of got everybody. Casuals, hardcore alike. That's unique success. Only seen one other time in the PlayStation 2. So if it does fail, it'll be for some other reason that I don't know off the top of my head. We don't know if the idea of having a system that anemic has perhaps bothered people, but I kind of doubt it at this point because, like we just said, Nintendo's been doing this for 20 years and they seem to be just kind of fine with it. So I don't know what reasons the Switch 2 might potentially fail. I'm not going to preach doom and gloom on that, but I also won't sit here and preach massive success, though I will guess that out of the gate it's probably going to do pretty well. And it sounds like they're pairing it with Mario Kart 9, which was the only game anybody bought a Wii U for, and it also sold crazy stupid well on the Switch originally. So it's kind of a smart move, kind of like launching the Switch with Zelda initially. I think that was one of the big flaws with the Wii U launch as well, is that the killer title was like New Super Mario Bros. U, and that wasn't something people felt they needed to have. But anyway, sorry, I've gone on long enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we can't top what you said. I mean, that's pretty much everything that we can say about it right now. It's still very new, very speculative. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you intend to get one at all?
From a collecting point of view, yes. From playing point of view, it depends on the launch titles and the upcoming games. Maybe not on launch day. I won't run after it. But depending as well on the launch games. But in general, I'm not keen on getting one on release yet.
Okay.
Until
that's fair.
We see more information. But as a collector, I will definitely want one for sure.
So long story short, you do want one for collection reasons, but gaming on it, you don't need to have it immediately. That's fair. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I I doubt there's a game they could launch with this thing other than Shenmue 4 that would make me go like, I must have this immediately. But that said, it is me. I know how I am. If I can get one right away, I will do that. I will not do scalper things, obviously. I would do, like a normal pre-order. If I can get that, I'm happy to order it right away and just see how it goes. But I also have the unfair advantage that I get to make videos out of it and stuff like that. So that's a different discussion altogether. But on that level, pretty much I'm in the same boat as you. I think I'm a little bit more eager to get it, but again, mostly so I can also make content with it. But that's a different thing. So do you have anything else you'd like to add about this?
Nope, nothing more to add. All good.
Okay. The only other thing I'll say on this is by the time this is out to the majority of you, we have a little over a month until the Nintendo Direct where they're going to talk more about it, which I think is like April 2nd. And from there, they'll probably just tell us things like, here's the games, here's the other features, here's the release date, that kind of stuff. It would not surprise me if the release date is pretty short after that, because if I remember correctly, the Switch's official announcement was like December 2016, like after Christmas. Maybe it was January. And then they did in February of 2017, they were like, okay, the Switch is our thing. And by the way, it'll be out next month. And then it came out in March of 2017. So it would not entirely shock me if they do that, but I guess we'll see. And one thing I do want to mention, because I got a bunch of flack for it in my Tinian video talking about this, is the big feature I missed is apparently that the new Joy-Cons will function as like what looks like mice. So yeah, so that might add some potential functionality for other things, which is, I mean, I don't know how much I would care about that. I don't game on PC, and even though consoles have a long history of having mouse options, I can't think of a single game where I ever sat down and was like, all right, I'm glad this game has a mouse. Now I'm going to play it. Like, I mean, it's cool. It's built in. It's, it's not like it's going to cost me anything additional, but like it doesn't do anything special for me, which is probably why I kind of forgot about it initially. All right, then we're going to move on. Abdullah, thank you very much for picking that subject. The next one up is from a Patreon backer whose name is Spencer Puryear. Now, Spencer, I reached out to him and I did not hear anything from him, so I kind of know how this goes with him. Typically, if that's the case, just pick something for me. So I did, and it's kind of fitting, actually. The subject question I've got going on here is, why are some consoles more fun to collect for than others? And I was going to roll into a whole thing here, but I feel like Abdullah might have something to say on this.
As of few days back, I finally completed the North American physical Wii U set.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And to me, actually, this is in all the time I've been collecting, ever since I started collecting, this is the first time I have a full set of something. It's not the full worldwide set like yours. Thank you. It's not like the worldwide set like you, Adam. I know you have the worldwide.
Yeah,
one,
but I'm crazy. Don't.
Yeah, I mean, even when you think about the worldwide set, it's like it goes up to, the total is like 200, right? 200-ish.
Yeah, a little bit around there, yeah.
Right? And the North American was like 160 something. I mean, sometimes there are some games people might count as different. Now, I don't know about you, but the pack that has Super Mario Brothers U and the Luigi one. Like, yes. I saw some lists that consider the Luigi game alone, the Mario game alone, and the combination game alone, and some lists that don't.
I do not personally.
Yeah,
I consider it.
Yeah. Yeah, and for some reason.
One release.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm with you. It's one release.
Yeah, it's one release. So to me, finding the list was a pain, and given that it was a small library, and you know how I source games, right? The way I source games isn't, I don't have proper local deals, except my friend Said's shop, but that's not gonna be. It's one single shop, right? And he can't get the stock the same way like shops in North America can. It's because that's where the original place it was released in. So I mainly decided to go for the North American set because all of my Wii U stuff was North American. Actually, most of my Wii U stuff is North American. I do have some PAL stuff, yes, but most were North American, so I decided to go there. So it was kind of a pain. It took a few years, but eventually I made it through. Now, this is one thing that I would say the Wii U is fun to collect for, at least for me, is because the first thing, because the main question is why are some consoles more fun than the others? Number one, the library isn't that big.
Yeah, that's a huge factor.
Yeah, that's a big factor. So you can see that it's feasible, it's possible to do this. Number two, currently it's not, the prices haven't skyrocketed, right? I think the currently Devil's Third is the most expensive one, right?
I bought it when it came out, so I lucked out on that one. When Devil's Third came out, I had like pre-ordered it on Amazon, so I got it right away. So I never had to deal with that one.
Yeah, so to me, I had to deal with that. Actually, what I paid for it, it's not that bad compared to what the prices are right now. But mine is a sealed copy, so I'm good.
Ooh.
So that's the toughest one to get, and I'm not sure how much it goes for right now, Devil's Third, but it's still not so high. Like, for example, look at Pokemon Box in the GameCube, how much that is right now. But compared to that, it's not much.
I have one of those too.
Sorry?
I have that too.
Pokemon Box?
In the box, yeah.
I have the same one, the big box. I actually have it.
Yeah, I got it years ago, kind of against my will, and turns out that was a very good call. That somebody forced me. I got bullied into buying that, and that was the correct decision. Anyway, that's a different story. But
yeah,
go on with your Wii.
Even with me, the Pokemon Box is actually a funny story. Somebody wanted to gift me something, but that was in my early days of collecting. So they told me, what are some games you want? So they wanted to give me a gift. I don't want to mention who that person is, but they wanted to give me a gift, and they didn't know how. So I told them these are just some of the games I like, and one of them was Pokemon Box. So I was like more than 10 years ago, or so something like that. And they got it, and they didn't pay much for it, and I still have it. So I didn't pay a dime for it.
That's impressive. Yeah, I got mine 10 years ago too at a con. I think I paid like $300 for it, and now it's like $3,000. Yeah, so it's like, dude, that one panned out.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I see it's more fun to. That's one or two things I would say that make more consoles better to collect than the others. Some consoles, maybe like for example the GameCube, is fun to collect for because it didn't do so well, but it's got a good library of games, and it's fun to appreciate them. This is one thing that puts the edge over the other. Sometimes you would think about exclusivity of a console. If it has exclusive games, it's fun to collect for. But when it comes to thinking like a full set or something like that, like I did with the Wii U, the reason is a small library of games, and there are a lot of good games on it. Actually, it's not like all the library is trash. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Like it's older
overall.
Brother. Okay, so I largely agree with your basic logic. It mostly boils down to the size of the library, the economy of it, like what it's going to cost you, the quality of that library. The one you didn't mention that I was a little surprised by is like your own personal nostalgia for that particular system.
Yeah, that's obviously
a good reason.
That's very obvious.
Yeah, that one's so obvious you didn't even mention it. Like but yeah,
probably thought of others.
Basically, those are the core. Yeah, so that's kind of the core reasons, if you ask me, why one does that. And what got me thinking about this, actually, it's kind of spoilers for videos that are coming up. But so I just got back from Japan again, and I'm doing a whole bunch of videos on stuff I picked up over there. And so when I'm showing the pickups that I got, you know, I was kind of sitting there and after like editing these videos thinking like, man, why do I pick up games for that system, but this one I don't? You know, like, for example, I try to go after like every Neo Geo CD game that I don't have, even though I have no designs on getting a full set. To the point where I'll put down money on that. But like the PCFX, you know, it's got a small library. It's like 62 games. I have the system. I already have like 10 of the games. But like I'll see games over there that I don't have all the time. They're not particularly expensive. I don't care. I just like go right past them and move on. And so the question to myself was like, why is that the case? And the parameters I kind of defined before are at best general rules, because every time I point those out, even to myself, I'm sure I can find an exception. So like, for example, the Apple Pippin. I have no nostalgia for it. Nobody does. It was a totally unsuccessful system. It is not a good system. The hardware is fine, but the game library sucks, so that works against it. It is not financially viable because the games are very expensive for the most part. And they're not readily available. Like, you know, you can really only find them in Japan, and even then you're lucky if you can find like one. So in other words, it fails basically every test, other than the library being small, I suppose. But I still want as many of them as I can get. I don't even like Apple. You know what I mean? Like, I hate their products. So why do I want every game for their system I can get my hands on? That's a different mentality. That one is more about like, I want to be the odd one out. You know, I want to be the guy who has that nobody else has that, if that makes any sense. That's like being a hipster douchebag. That's what that one is. But like each console has a different logic behind it. And some of them will change. Like the Bandai Pladia. There was a time where I treated it kind of the way I treated the Pippin, where I was like, oh, if I find games for it, I'll just pick it up. Although the games weren't expensive, but they were kind of hard to find. This last trip, I found games all the time to the point where I was like, dude, if I actually buy these, I'll fill my suitcase up with just junk, and I won't have any space for anything good. So I started skipping them. Then there's other systems that I'm like, I have specific rules on. Like, I'm sure you've heard me talk about, like, I have a full Dreamcast set. And that one makes sense because, like, favorite game console of all time, so I want everything for it, including even the stuff that's stupid. Like, after you get the full set, you're like, okay, I need to go ham and see if I can find demo discs and stuff like that. And I kind of have that same mentality to an extent for the original Xbox, and to the Wii U. Which is funny because you mentioned the Wii U earlier. I too have a full set of that, but like you said, I have the global set. Now with the Wii U, the only stuff I can pick up is like weird stuff. So like the last two things I picked up for it was a Japanese Wii U cleaning disc and a Wii U kiosk disc, because those are the only like new things that I didn't have, you know?
Yeah, and you could pick up box variants, like different bundles as well.
The thing is, I mean, that's a separate thing, and I guess I could have mentioned this point. The problem with collecting stuff like this, I mean, there's many problems with it, to be honest, but one of them in our case is every collector has different rules. So, like, I don't include variants, and it sounds like you don't either, but other people do.
Yeah, I don't count variants.
Well, does this count? Yeah, see, but again, every collector has different rules, and it's usually boils down to the same other rules. Like, the reason you have those rules is because they go against the wallet argument, they go against the nostalgia argument, sometimes they go against just simple storage argument, etc. But every collector has different rules, so there's not a whole lot of uniformity, and that's why it's kind of a fun discussion to talk about, because we all have these rules, and I bet every single one of us has exceptions to those rules. And that's kind of what I'm getting out there is, you know, even systems that I love, like the GameCube, right? My rule with that is I don't want a full set. What I want is every game on it that didn't exist on the original Xbox, because that's an extremely large library, but still, you cut out a ton of stuff that there's just no reason to have since I'm getting the original Xbox version. Whereas something like the PlayStation 2, it's completely impossible to think about getting a full set for that system, even in North America, much less globally. So in that case, I'm like, all right, well, I really will just get exclusive content. But because it had such a ridiculous library, you can have just exclusives and still have a massive collection for that system. But like, even that's just one generation. It changes from generation to generation, console to console. And so it's just a fun thing to discuss, because you just go like, why do I do it this way? And I can only break it down on a case-by-case basis. How about you?
Yeah, so talking about the rules and especially when it comes to variants. So I don't count variants, but again, as you said, everybody has their own rules, right? So in my case, I don't usually go for variants unless it's a specific game or series that I'm into, that I would go for variants. For example, Yoshi's the Woolly World game, right, on Wii U. I went for. I'm planning to, at least. I want to get the 3 different variants. It came with the amiibo.
And that big plushie, right?
Yeah, it came with like 3 amiibos, right? One came with the red one with pink, one with blue, one with green. So for me, this is something I want to get, but I don't count variants. I don't go for them unless it's a specific thing I want to get. And as you said, again, everybody has their own rules. So in my case, for example, like you said, for example, GameCube, the goal is, in your case, to get something that wasn't on the original Xbox. In my case, the GameCube is to get games for series I like, as well as some rarities. Um, that's generally it. And I would generally choose just a few rare items to get in order to make it, I would say, a personal signature kind of collection. That's how. Yeah, that's how I put it. And even in the when I
That's
list down what I want, or try to make a checklist or whatever, I write like a personal signature collection. So, what is it defined by? Is it defined by I want a full set, or is it defined by getting so and so series games? So, for example, when it comes to the 3DS, I want to get the games for the series that I like and play. Like, for example, I like Pokemon, so I want to get the Pokemon games, something like that. I like Sonic, okay, so I like to, get the Sonic games on 3DS. I like Kirby, I'll get the Kirby games. Mario, I'll get the Mario games. But I will not get any random game, for example, in terms of 3DS. But when it comes to GameCube, no, the rule changes. I get what I like, and some odds and ends like rarities and things like that, but not a full set. I would call it, instead of a full set, I would call it a signature set, something like that. Signature to me, like my personal one. So that's where it goes for. In the end, everybody has their own rules, and what makes it fun to collect is when you have those rules and you base them off the point you mentioned, which is your personal nostalgia, like, or what makes you feel happy and rewarded. One more thing, though, you mentioned is very interesting. Is There are some consoles that you pass by, and you're like, I don't want to touch this. That's not my thing. So funny enough, for me, that's the Nintendo 64. I'm not a. I wouldn't say I don't like it. It's not my console to collect for. So I don't have a personal connection to it. So this is one of those consoles that many people like, but to me it's something that, I didn't grow up with it. I'm not attached to it, so to me it doesn't hold much value in my collection. Maybe getting stuff for it, just checking out the good games, yeah, or maybe for just the collecting purpose, yeah. But overall, it's not a console I would go out of my way to get stuff for.
Okay. I first of all, there's a lot to unpack there. When it comes to variants, I'm totally with you. Exactly the same mentality. I will only make that exception in unique cases. So, like, for me, obviously, Shenmue. Like, I've got every variant. Like, dude, I have Russian versions of those games. You realize how hard that is to get now? Like, I've got that. Whereas, so like that's an exception. And then that one's the most extreme, but there's other ones kind of seeded throughout. Like, I think I have every variant of Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 for
Yeah,
Dreamcast.
same thing here with Sonic Adventure 2.
But that's also because you're a Sonic super collector. I'm not. Like, I like Sonic,
Yeah,
but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, there's also that rare 2-pack that came with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Sonic Adventure DX.
oh, for Cube, yeah.
Yeah, I have that. I don't have the Sonic Heroes one, but I have the one with Adventure 1 and 2.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that one's North American's like crazy expensive variant. And really, you're just buying that outer case.
Yeah, the box is horrible,
but anyway,
still.
The box is what's worth money because everything else is standard.
Yeah, the condition of the box is horrible. All right.
Yeah, that's normal. Those big boxes. But I really like the term you used, signature collection, because when I hear that, what that says to me is like, yes, this says something about me. This is a flair. This is, I picked this based on my personality. So hypothetically, if you've done that correctly, someone can look at it and understand who you are kind of based on what you picked. At least someone who's into the hobby. To like a normal quote unquote person, if they saw our collections, they'd be like, oh my God, you're losers. But you know what I'm trying to say? Like, to someone within the hobby, they could go and look. Like, if I walked into your game room or whatever and looked at your stuff, I could easily pinpoint, like, okay, he's really into Cube, but clearly doesn't like 64, that kind of thing. Which I think is an interesting point. And I want to say two more things. One, you were talking about the N64 and like how you have no nostalgia for it, and so that's how I feel about like the NES. Like, I respect it, I have games for it, I don't really have any great desire to get any more. I don't really care about it. I have no nostalgia for it really, outside of a few nice memories, but that's good enough, But it is funny because this is something else we could really discuss if we wanted to, which is systems you are nostalgic for that for some reason you don't collect. Like, Super Nintendo was a substantial part of my childhood, as was the Sega Genesis. I love both of those systems dearly. I rank the Genesis as my second favorite system and the SNES as my third. Yet I almost never collect anything for them. And I think that the reason that happened is because when I really started going hardcore into collecting stuff, that's when those two were at the peak of their like expensive, value, as it were. And so I just kind of like, I'll wait. Well, now would be kind of more the time that stuff's coming back down, and yet I don't find myself having, shall we say, the mega drive to do anything about it. Terrible jokes aside, I just, I don't know. Maybe that's a different phenomenon altogether, but it's something worth thinking about.
It's interesting because I have that with the original DS. I grew up with it. I played games on it, like a bunch of games on it. It was a big part of my childhood, but I'm not actively collecting it. Now, it could be that in my head the idea is that it's not that expensive of a console to collect for, so I'm like, okay, let me focus on the more harder to get stuff than that. Than the DS. So it could be due to that. It could be due to the fact that I'm nostalgic for the games only, not the system. It could be multiple factors, but when it comes, for example, to the GameCube, no, as I mentioned to you, like it goes all. I go more deeply into it. It could be that that's the case. It's, as you said, could be a whole different phenomenon overall.
Yeah. And the last point I want to bring up here before we go, and I'm sure you've encountered this, although I encountered it in probably a way a little bit more extreme than you did, just due to the fact that I have a YouTube channel, which is people who inevitably don't understand why you have a collection of stuff. And that's fair. Like, I don't expect everyone to be into my hobbies, you know, but the thing with YouTube anyway, is because I make videos about collecting stuff. It is a very substantial part of the channel. What I always find funny is that I will have people inevitably who watch videos and be like, why do you need all that stuff? How about you use emulators? And I sit there going like, do you, sir, genuinely believe that you just introduced new information to me? That I've been doing this for, I'm 38, and I've been doing this for the better part of, let's say, 30 plus years. And in all that time, I was just simply never made aware of the concept of emulators. And you just like broke the matrix around me. You just introduced me to something. I was like, bruh, I had no idea. It's like, so like, I am a chunky dude. I grew up fat. It's like when I was in high school and somebody would call me fat and I'd be like, oh, wow, thanks. I had no idea. I'd never heard that before. This is new information. When did this happen? When did I get fat? I better get to the gym right away. Like, dude, trust me, we know. We don't care. It's a choice. Much like I choose not to do stuff with emulators because that is not how my gaming experience works. And I want to make this very crystal clear to a lot of people who listen to this, who are like, yeah, I don't get the whole collecting thing. I like seeing you do it. I like talking about it, but I don't get it personally. To me, collecting isn't, it is the game. And that's the part I think a lot of people don't understand, is that like, I can see all the time people are like, why would you pick up a game you're not going to play? Because they see it solely as the form of entertainment value that disc or cartridge or whatever gives you once you put it into the console and play it as a game, which that exists for me too. But I have the additional layer of, I like going out and looking for something. That's like basically the primal nature of man wanting to hunt, except instead of shooting animals, I'm buying plastic and I get the same kind of joy out of it. And then at the end, I get to enjoy owning a piece of history, owning some artwork, and getting, I guess you'd call it the dopamine rush of having that item, but then getting to appreciate it, getting to talk about it, getting to celebrate its history and existence. In my case, also being able to make content about it if I choose to, where I can say like, here is something that is cool and special to me for all of these reasons. That concept can really only be defined down to the word as of charm. And that's something you simply do not have in an emulator. I don't deny that emulators exist. I don't deny the benefits therein for whatever reason, budgetary, spatial, its performance even in some cases. I don't deny any of that. But what I don't enjoy is when people come to me and think there's a sense of superiority in it, and you completely missed the point of why I did this at all. That's on you, dog. You're not teaching me anything here. In fact, you're missing out on information. But that's just me, personal pet peeve.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's like the whole concept of a museum, right? For example, the museums. What's the purpose of it? They celebrate history. They celebrate art. So you think from that angle, you could see collecting as some form of art and preservation. Video games are a form of art worthy of preservation. That could be one angle, somebody can take, instead of just thinking of it, there are emulators and so on and so forth. Yes, there are emulators technically that you can play the game with, but as you said, celebrate the history of the game and things like that.
Yeah, I that's a great way of comparing it too. And I have actually had this argument with people before, but usually people are not this dense. But what you said there is very true. It's basically like, what if I was, hey guys, we're in Paris and we're going to go to the Louvre and check out the Mona Lisa. And some guy's like, LOL, I can just Google what that looks like. I don't need to go there. It's like, dude, it is not the same. It is not the same experience. Like, that one is an original masterpiece of artwork created by Leonardo da Vinci. It's been through all of this stuff and blah, 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 blah. The other one is you just Google search something on your phone. Every single one of us has access to see what the Mona Lisa looks like. Not every one of us has access to go see it for real. And that's kind of what emulators versus a collection are like to me. And like I said, I don't take any great sense in superiority in that. You want to play your games through emulators, go ahead. I don't expect everyone to be a collector. But I have never once, ever seen the reverse of that situation. I have never seen a guy sitting there on YouTube talking about, all right, guys, so I got my laptop out. We're going to pop on a Sega Genesis emulator. Let's talk about it. And people in the comments are like, dude, why don't you just buy all the games for real and have a big collection, bruh? I've never seen the reverse. Do you know why? Because one comes off with this attitude of superiority, and the other one comes off with an attitude of, historian, really. And it's just, that scenario is ridiculous backwards, but for some reason it's acceptable in one direction. And it's just something that annoys me because I have to deal with it all the time. And also, why are you watching collecting videos if you don't collect? That part's also strange to me, but that's different.
Yeah, that's true. If you're not interested, then just don't watch.
Yeah, that'd be like me going out and watching a bunch of like soccer, videos, which is a sport I don't play and don't watch, and be like, why don't you guys just play basketball, bro? It's like, dude, they're all clearly doing something like in one very specific thing that I'm not interested in. Why am I going there trying to screw that up for them? Or attempting to put on my propaganda, if you will. But I don't know. That's just a pet peeve of dealing with that for the last 16 years on YouTube. Anywho, anything else you would like to say on the concept of collecting, why it's fun, and etc.?
Nope, all good. That's all what I can say.
All right. The only other point I will make is that you guys, again, to those who are more reasonable, not the extreme "I only use emulators, bruh" argument, which I have very much seen many times. Those who are like, man, I got like a small little collection. I just keep the stuff I like to play, whatever. Nothing against you, dog. That is a completely reasonable position. I have never anything against that. But I bet you also don't simultaneously go out and tell everybody that you're superior because of how much you don't do something. At the end of the day, you need to understand that guys like Abdullah and I, we're dragons sitting on piles of treasure. It's just what makes us happy is to preserve that and have it and pass it on to the future, because the simple reality is to be a game collector, there has to be something in you that considers yourself something of a preservationist, a historian. It's not really a coincidence that the people who run things like the National Video Game Museum or the Video Game History Foundation are themselves collectors, because they want to make sure that stuff is preserved and that it's passed on. And I will grant you, there is a nice argument for digital preservation, so you at least back up the data. But, we can back up the data of, John Wilkes Booth's diary. Like, we know what it said. But to preserve the actual Booth diary is special. John Wilkes Booth's the guy who shot Lincoln, just in case you don't know, Abdullah.
I know that.
It's okay, good. But just my point is, yes, having the information safe is good, but the original artifacts, that's good to preserve too. Okay, so on that preachy soapbox note, we'll step down. So thank you very much to Spencer Puryear for that subject, even though technically you didn't pick it. And we're going to move on to a round of shout-outs here. So the following people are Patreon backers, and they are at the tier in which they get a shout-out. So thank you very much to Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Also, Abdullah, thank you very much as always for joining me, bro.
You're welcome. Always happy to be here.
And we're back. And believe it or not, he's finally returned. The prodigal son, the one all of you always want to hear from. Joseph is finally back. Dude, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I was trying to make people...
Were a bit...
I was trying to make people think we were talking about Rob. No, nobody ever wants Rob back. But no. But it's so the thing is, Joseph and I had poor scheduling conflicts. When was the last time you were on it? Was it like back in October?
October sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like every month since then, like our schedules didn't align. So he's been a very good sport about this. So yeah, I'm glad you're here. But with that said, obviously, you being a backer, you get to pick a subject. And I'll just kind of spoil it. He got to pick both subjects because the other backer, who we'll talk about when we get there, did not have one. So, this is kind of the all Joseph show. So are you ready?
I am.
All right. Well, why don't you lead into your first subject?
Okay. So topic number one, I'm sure, well, this is going to date the episode on when we're recording, but I'm sure you're very familiar about what happened this past weekend.
Yes, but I mean, what doesn't... Here, hang on. what doesn't date this podcast? Like, we literally put the date in the name. Like, it comes out, like 3 weeks to the Patreon backers before it comes to the public. That's fine. We try to just
I'm
have
blind, clearly.
Yeah, that's all right. We try to have interesting discussions about things as they happened in our world, and hopefully they still have some historical relevance later, or they are just general gaming discussions that people enjoy. But that said, yes, this in particular is a very temporary issue, but I'm glad you brought it up. So sorry for interrupting you, but yes, please elaborate. What happened this past weekend at the time of recording?
As far as we know, like, basically, Sony's PSN went down for, like, an extended period of time, about a day, so not the worst outage that they had, but it was still very noticeable to people. Like, I know that, like, when I went upstairs to like, talk to my brother-in-law, he's like, yeah, PSN's down, I can't play, the PlayStation 5 doesn't work. It's like, oh. It's like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine, we'll come back. It's like, yeah, it's saying it's maintenance for some reason. It's been out since last night, and we're like, oh, no, it's not maintenance, because this was Saturday. Like, it goes out Friday night on Saturday, something's wrong. No company would ever schedule maintenance for a weekend. Like, well, no company in Sony's position, anyway. Like, obviously, like, people who don't have anyone who does anything on the weekend would. But anyway, that's not really the thing I'm more interested about with this, because, I mean, networks go down, things happen, you could speculate about it all you want. I'm more interested and annoyed somewhat by Sony's response to it. Namely, because they basically just went, yeah, here's 5 days of PS Plus. Here you go. It's like, which I guess it's not nothing, but at the same time, it's like, I don't have PlayStation Plus. If I wanted to play PlayStation games, I couldn't. Like, single-player games didn't work. You could barely play anything. I'm sure some disc-based games didn't work either. So...
Yeah, so, all right, I obviously, I was like you, I existed through this. I did not bother firing my PS5 up in that time, so it kind of was just rolled off my back. I was busy editing videos the whole time, but it was fun to follow this story, because what we learned from it, at least at the time we're recording now, they were effectively out for over a day, just like you said. The reason at this point in time is not yet public, although that may change at some point, but my guess is it will not, because this is the kind of thing people do tend to forget relatively quickly. So in fact, he's right. By the time you hear this, you'll be like, oh yeah, that did suck. We're expecting that kind of reaction. But yeah, so basically it's probably technical, as in like legit, like something straight up went down, like from the physical, like, server. For all we know, somebody crashed into it with a car. I have no idea exactly what happened, but I completely agree with you. There's no way they intended to do this. People look to like, oh, hackers, blah, blah, blah. I kind of doubt it, because hackers usually take credit for stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a DDoS attack, but like other than that, like it wasn't like an actual hack, like in 2011 or whenever that was.
The 2014 North Korean Sony hack. Yeah, no, not that. Yeah, no, it wasn't that. But yes, a DDoS attack, right? But more likely, it really was just something bricking, and because it was a weekend, they weren't able to narrow that down super quickly, and then this is just what happens. Mm-hmm. I'm not that concerned about that side of things, only because I have been saying for the better part of 20 years at this point, which is depressing, like, this is coming, like digital dependency in video games is there. And it was kind of fascinating to at least sit there on social media watching people have meltdowns about the fact that their consoles don't do anything without an internet connection. Lots of people can't access games, particularly digital games. It's kind of funny, actually. A lot of the disc-based stuff was still working.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I know. And not all of it. A lot of it was gimped. Like, if there was any sort of patch or if there was some sort of expansion or whatever. In a lot of cases, apparently wasn't working. But apparently, digital stuff, for the most part, was non-functional entirely. And I guess some people were like, well, I had my if you had your console in offline mode, ironically, you were kind of okay. And I don't know enough about how that works, but I think in order for you to run the PS5 in offline mode, you must first update it to tell it you're going into offline mode. In other words, if your system is suddenly offline without that update, then it can't function offline. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's basically what Microsoft was trying to do back in 2013. We just stopped caring because we just kind of accepted it. But today, or not today, I mean the other day when this happened, that was kind of an interesting wake-up call, particularly, I think, for Gen Z, who was just not aware of how this works. And it is funny because I went on Twitter. Yes, I still call it Twitter. And I just posted very casually about it. I'm like, look, man, this is just a reminder of what I've been telling everybody forever. And like, today a whole lot of people got reminded of why digital content isn't property. And for the most part, you had people defending it, but a lot of the most common negative response I got to that was, well, physical media is broken too, so don't act like it's perfect. And I'm like, I never mentioned modern physical media anywhere. All I said is that digital content is broken. But modern physical content, as I'm sure you've noticed, is largely basically digital ecosystems. Like, there's no reason that disc shouldn't work, but it's kind of tied to a digital ecosystem because that's just where we've gone. But it is ironic, or maybe even more fitting to some extent, that people with the discs were having less problems than the people without them. Even though there really is no reason that should be the case, because they're effectively the same. I mean, the game doesn't even play off the disc. It's installed to the system. It's just using the disc as an unlock key. So
which is why it probably worked.
Yes, that's my guess, is that Sony's system is basically like your unlock key on the disc is the disc itself, and for the digital version it's a handshake with a server, which was not possible. I don't know that, but I would guess that that's how that works. So in these type of scenarios, that's when you find that out. But I sit there, and of course I'm a big retro game enthusiast, and so I sit there being like, that's fine, I live offline on stuff like that. But again, I don't think there's ever going to be really a point where like the masses wake up and say like, we want consumer digital rights, and
it's too late. Even if they did, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, we're just like, it would take something extreme for that to happen, and I just don't see it panning out. Like, it would literally take someone like me running for the presidency for that kind of thing, to happen, where you have someone who really cares about digital protection rights or digital customer rights. Because that's the closest we might get to that is like when the first millennial is a president, because like boomers don't care. Gen X probably doesn't really care. Like, that's how long it's going to take. But at the same time, by that point,
like, it's going to be impossible to roll back.
Yeah, because it'll just be too far gone, because everything will just be like tied to it. It would be like suddenly now in 2025 demanding that all oil companies cease production on that and exclusively, make cars that run on water. It's like, what? You
had the hydrogen fuel cell chance like 20 years ago.
Yeah. And, you had, I'm not going to go into all this, but like, you had different power consumption options years ago where we were defining what that infrastructure would be. Or, the thing is with any industry like that, like, once it gets too far, it's not practical to ever fix it. Like, there was a time in this country where different phone companies were trying to get separate phone lines, different technologies between calls. So like, if you had AT&T, you could only call people with AT&T. Imagine if that's how it worked. But stuff like that. But like, that got sorted out relatively in its infancy. But other things, that didn't pan out. And then this is going to be one of those other things. Like, we're just allowing this, and it's not realistic to assume that it's going to change.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm more interested in like Sony's response and like just like how. I mean, on one hand, like, I get compensating to people who are paying you money for online because they lost a day. But at the same time, like, your other customers also lost a day. They weren't able to play games that didn't require PlayStation Plus. And that does nothing for them.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, like, if you're just the average Joe who wanted to use your PS5 that day, you couldn't. And
Yeah.
but I mean, like, the thing is, I can't even be shocked or outraged anymore. Like, I've said this and predicted this for, like I said, nearly 20 years. I'm like, this is just the direction we've all decided to go together. And it's like, yeah, when this happens, you just kind of go, yeah, no shit. Like, this is what you picked. This is what you decided on. So it's, I mean, not that I'm saying Sony should just not have to face any, repercussions, but at this point I'm like, are you shocked that they're not going to? Like I'm not surprised, like, this is what I would expect. When you forego all of your consumer rights into the digital ecosystem,
that's what happens.
Yes, that's what happens. You've given up those rights.
Yeah. And, like, to be fair, like, as far as, like, I'm actually concerned, my brother-in-law's PS5 is hooked up. Mine's in the box right now, so it's not like it actually affected me in any meaningful way whatsoever. I just, like, saw Sony's response. I was like, really, you're gonna do a compensation response, and that's all you're gonna do?
Yeah, because the truth is, we don't really know what happened over there. Odds are some shit just broke, and it was poor timing. Like, it's probably that stupid.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely stupid.
I'm sure the guys, everyone who has PS Plus was like, well, 5 extra days for free. All right, whatever, fine, I'll take it. And then for guys like us, it's like, well, that's just how the cookie crumbles. If you, I guess what I would say is, you went into it knowing that this can happen because it's digital ecosystem. So you have to, you go in understanding that's going to occur. It's like going into buying a car and knowing you're going to have to pay for gas, that doesn't come with it forever. Like, there's going to be, or that it's going to have engine problems or something at some point. Like, you just know that's the kind of problems that occur with it. I don't think it's right, but I just think that's what it is. Like, I'm not shocked that happened.
I'm not honestly shocked either.
I also don't think we're going to get any further updates on this. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. The only way we would get further updates is if this was, like, really significant, like the Russians hacked Sony, or something. Like, it would have to be pretty extreme for that to be the case.
Yeah, but if something like that happened again, like, it would be like in 2011 where PSN was down for, like, 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, I remember that.
The fact that it's fixed already makes it seem like it's probably not that.
Yeah, it could have been as simple as a guy knocked over a server rack or something. Like, we have no idea. So it is what it is. And I don't, other than just to constantly remind you guys, those digital games and digital content, you don't own any of that. When you go to Amazon and you're like, oh, I bought a movie digitally, it's mine. I mean, they were literally in court arguing that you don't own it. So no, it's not yours. It's yours to use as long as they allow it, which you have decided to give them that power over you. Congratulations. Anything else you want to say on this depressing PSN? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, Joseph, thank you very much for depressing the whole room.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the one you were more passionate about talking about, but you don't get credit for this, even though you did pick it. So this actually goes to Sinjeet, Patreon backer, who gets to pick a subject, but he didn't. So Joseph picked for him. So thank you very much, Sinjeet. Now, Joseph, what is this magical subject that Sinjeet picked for you?
Well, honestly, speaking of talking about digital games and stuff like that, there's been a new trend in the gaming industry lately, and by lately, I mean the last couple of years, where if you pre-order a game and get, like, the deluxe edition or special edition or whatever, or an upgraded edition, you get to play the game. You get to play the game early before anyone else. And when I first mentioned the subject to you, I was like, yeah, it might be something interesting to talk about. Then I remembered that it only actually applies to digital games. I'm like, oh, you're going to hate this immediately.
That actually makes perfect sense to me. I mean, how else would it work?
I mean, that's fair. Like, my brain just didn't process that. Oh yeah, they're not going to ship the disc out early if you get the physical version of the deluxe edition, because that's just going to get the game pirated faster for sure, or whatever.
So are you basically pitching, like, what is your stance on this, or just the phenomenon of its existence, or
yeah, like, generally, like, as a general idea, like, what do we think about, like, the fact that this is something that's been tried and happening for a while, like, And the fact it's going to keep happening at this point, like, it's probably not going away. And I say that as someone who is a little bit part of the problem, but it's probably not going to go away anytime soon, even though when you think about it, it's definitely something that's meant to make people be like, oh, I have to buy this special edition version of it now, because then I get to play it a week early type deal. And for context, the most recent game to do this that I actually bought to play early was Civ 7, which officially came out yesterday. But if you did bought like either of the special editions, you could play it like on the 6th. So that's what had it in my mind when thinking about it. But like I said, it's been happening for a while. Sonic and Shadow Generations did it. Starfield did it. I'm pretty sure a bunch of other games did it too, but those are ones that I've just thought about in particular. So that's something that I thought would be interesting to bring up.
Okay, so my take on this is, much like the PSN thing, I am not in the slightest shocked by this. The problem with the gaming industry, and they've known it for years, is that you don't get as many bites out of the apple as you do with, say, like the film industry, where you have the original theatrical distribution, and then you had the home media release, and then you theoretically had multiple formats for the home media release. You had multiple markets, whatever. The gaming, it's kind of a one and done, especially with how much content there is. Now, over time, they've found other ways to do that. We found creative ways to do reissues, but the reissues typically require more money put into them. So, like, you can remaster a game and put it out for a new generation, but that meant you had to spend money to remaster it. Whereas a movie, aside from maybe extreme 4K restoration efforts or something, not a whole lot of money goes into that. So they basically try to find creative ways to do this. And digital is one of those methods. It'll not only allows them to control the ecosystem, the distribution, the legitimacy of the copy, et cetera, but they also, can cut down on distribution costs, namely with physical media and the artwork and all the plastic, everything that goes into that. But it does not in any way shock me, as we've leaned further into DLC is no longer a bonus. It's now an expectation that you need it in order to complete the game or whatever. It's not remotely shocking to me that we're moving into a direction where they're like, well, let's combine all that and say, like, you can have the true experience of the game, because really that's what you're saying. If up front you're saying the deluxe has all this extra content, which means it's really trying to say it has the whole game. It's not shocking to say we're also willing to sell it to you a week early so that you're cool for bonus money or whatever. Like, it's just an extra way to get revenue streams. I don't really like the practice. I understand it. I get why they do it. Playing devil's advocate, from their perspective, when the consumer market is the way it is, I would do it too. Like, as evil as that sounds.
Oh, yeah, if I was like a game developer, or I worked in the gaming industry, and I was like an executive or a marketing person, yeah, I would jump over to this and make sure every game I did something like, well, every game I was expected to be popular anyway would do this.
Precisely. So it's hard to really get mad at them about that, unless like they are intentionally delivering games broken by releasing them a week early. But at the same time, this is like a conversation, honestly, that I think would have had more legs a decade ago. Because the thing is, now we have all just expected all of this. Like, games are now, they're supposed to come out broken, and you're supposed to get the patch, and you're supposed to wait for that. It's supposed to come with the DLC. It's supposed to be gimped until you do that. It's supposed to not really be on the disc. It's supposed to be downloaded. You're supposed to sit in the digital ecosystem, all that sort of stuff. And you just go like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't that be the thing now, that I can pay a little bit more and get it a week earlier? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, it's basically at this point, it's so fundamentally broken that you don't even, I'm not gonna say you don't care, but it's like you're not shocked by anything anymore. Like, what could they do now that would actually be shocking, other than just like, yeah, you buy the game and you'd never get it. Like, aside from that,
yeah, or you buy the game and you only have it for a month and then you have to pay again to play it.
Well, that one's actually a real possibility, so let's not scare them with bad ideas. But yes, like if paying full price for a game was a trial thing where you would only get it for 30 days and then you have to rebuy the game every 30 days, yeah, that would be the next horrible thing. And here's an idea that is so awful and evil that I could easily see them doing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of concept that gets introduced at some point. Hell, I would argue that's kind of what subscription games already are. But rather than calling them that, something like an Elder Scrolls Online, where, yeah, you can play it without that, but really the game is nowhere near as good without that subscription. Like, just expanding that concept to more and more games to the point where it's just becomes standard. That's the worst thing, is these practices that we're discussing now are not actually new. They've all existed for a long time. The problem is they've become accepted over the course of time. And it's just become the standard now, when it was once, considered morally bankrupt to even think of that. But like I said earlier, in the PSN thing, like, people just, this is where we are. People just don't really care anymore. I mean, not to be all Debbie Downer on you, it's just not the same as it once was, simply because everything has internet dependency. And because everything has internet dependency, that means it's dependent upon that. And you don't control that. You never will.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess if they would have tried this like 5 years ago, or maybe even like probably more like 7 if we're being realistic, we probably would, a lot more people would probably have been pissed about it. But at this point, it's like, yeah, okay. Like in my case, like I've actually bought games that did this twice and got them early to play them. But I basically did it because I looked at, like, the digital, like, what was coming with the advanced editions, and was like, well, okay, if I take out this early game access and look at it like this, would I still buy that version? And the answer turned out to be yes. I was like, well, okay, I'll just do it now then. But
I'm not blaming you. I completely understand why you would do it. See, the thing is, that's the other part, is it's kind of hard to get mad at anybody here, because we agree that if you were in distribution, you would think this is a good idea. And we agree that if you are a consumer that sees all this and says, yes, I want this, then you think this is a good idea. So where's the problem? The problem is, again, to both of us, it's just in consumer rights. And just now the soft bigotry of low expectations. In other words, we're not getting mad about it anymore because we're just so beaten down and used to it, because we don't expect to be treated better, to the point where we're like, oh, that's such a great idea. Like they won. They successfully beat that into you, where they think you're winning by them taking advantage of you.
Yep.
That's just where we're at.
Yeah,
because
like,
here, let me pitch to this way.
Like, again, like I said, the most recent game that did this and one that I got was Civ 7. Like, I had like about like 1,600 hours in Civ 6. There was no way in hell I was not buying Civ 7 and buying the Founders Edition with all of the initially planned DLC eventually included. There was just no way, because I'd be getting that DLC day one if I'd pre-bought it or not. Like, this is a game that I'll just play. Like, even if it's not as good as even if it wasn't as good as Civ 6, or if it's like, I actually don't like it very much, I would have figured that out, like, at, like, 300 hours in. And I would still go back to it when it gets updated. It's just that type of game for me. So.
And that's, again, I'm not judging you. Like I just said, right. You can do as you like. You won, they won, everybody won. The thing where I'm trying to focus more on what is society losing in that. And I guess in this sense, what you would say is, if the game was ready for you, the customer, to have, that means that they just intentionally delayed it a week for everybody else.
Who didn't?
It wasn't that
extra.
You got.
Yeah, that's the issue.
It's not that the extra week was necessary for the game to be the best product. It was that they just kicked the can down the road a week because they wanted to make some money off of people taking advantage of people who wanted to jump on it, quote unquote, early, when really it's just on time. Mm-hmm. And that's what society loses, is the expectation of the product being completed and ready to go and ready for you to have when it's supposed to be. You now have a paywall between you and a product. Well, more of a paywall than already existed. I mean, but that's, again, I'm not surprised. And I think if I was in their position, I would completely understand why they were doing it, and I would almost even agree with them. I'm talking more generally about the social implications of all of this, and, you know, just kind of how this keep it, again, we're just kind of we're accepting all of this at this point, and so it just feels kind of beaten down. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. And honestly, like, we're both adults. Let's be honest. Like, a lot of the time we're not really talking about a lot of stuff recent stuff that we're experiencing game-wise in person with people anymore. It's with whatever friends we have online who are also into it. But, like, as far as, like, the fear of missing out, like, FOMO goes, like, people who are, like, teenagers and stuff, they're going to be like, oh, crap, okay, I have to actually get the deluxe edition now. I definitely need it. I need it. I have to play it now, otherwise everyone's going to be talking about this, and I'm going to look like an idiot.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, FOMO because of spoilers and being cool and being that kid who can't afford to get it right away, so all his friends has it and he does. Okay, yeah. That's a demographics thing. Obviously, with us, that doesn't apply. Mostly because we're at that age where, A, our friends and us don't care about that kind of thing anymore, and B, we're also old enough to be like, I don't give a shit. We just...
it's like, oh, I can't afford to buy game I've been looking forward to at a price that would get it to me a week early. Whatever, I'll just not go on that section of the internet. I'll be talking about it for a week, whatever.
I was going to say more because we're adults who are just like, no reasonable adult is going to tell their other adult buddy, like, that, you know, with all sincerity, that they're like a loser because they can't play the game 1 week early.
No.
Like, you'd be like, dude, I gotta work. Like, I'm 38. You know, like, I don't have time. Like, you know, like all of us would do. So yeah, that's a different mentality. But, you know, it's kind of interesting to
like, if you're really that
angle,
avoidant on spoilers, it's just like, whatever, just ignore the parts of the internet that you know we're going to talk about it for until you get it. Like, whatever.
It's funny.
But like, none of your friends are going to make fun of you. None of them are going to be like, oh god, you have to play this game. You have to play this game. We don't care anymore. Like, if we like a game, it's like, yeah, that game's cool. Like, if you want to start getting into it, this is probably a good entry to jump in on, but that's going to be the extent of it. We don't really get super excited, like, oh my god, this is the best game ever anymore. Because, you know, we're old and we have, like, a bajillion games that we could play.
Yeah. Okay, so, funny thing you mentioned that, so it got me thinking, because I was thinking, like, the only time I ever see people react like this is when some big movie comes out, but because of time zones or whatever, like, it'll come out in Australia first, so, like, reviews will be up, like, 2 days before they're here, you know, that kind of thing, and that's when you're starting to avoid it. I have seen that with video games, but only a handful, and usually only ones that are, like, very narrative intensive and usually have a big base. Like, there must have been examples since this, but the last time I remember that being a big deal was like when BioShock Infinite came out, like well over a decade ago, and everybody was talking about the ending of the game and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure it has happened since, but that's the last time I remember that being a big deal, and that's the only scenario where I could think of that being significant. And that makes me think, like, what is the big... Like, maybe if Last of Us 3 existed, right? And, you know, that Sony put it out to, like, PlayStation Plus users would have the option to, like, get it 2 weeks early or something. And, you know, whatever. If they did that, then, like, the ending of that game could have some significance, like, on the internet. The fact that only some people could get access to it. But, like, I don't think you're going to spoil, like, the new Mario Kart by having it early. Because, like... But you know what I'm trying to say?
I think that's Mario Kart, but yeah,
but that's
what you're saying.
Even all right, Super Mario Odyssey 2 wouldn't matter because it's not a narrative-driven story or game, I should say. Yeah. So that's where I mean, there's a discussion to be had there, but that's kind of where I go with that. Is like I think this subject, this concept, I think will largely be ignored until it falls into that type of Last of Us 3 hypothetical scenario where there is a narrative story that has a lot of demand, where a lot of people want to see what goes on with it, and then it was hidden behind a paywall. If you were special, you got to find out how the game goes before everybody else, and thus gave you the capacity to be the guy that ruined it on the internet, etc. Made videos before anybody else. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So that I could see cause drama with this, but outside of that, I think we're just at that point where nobody cares.
Probably, yeah. Well, we'll see if anything like that actually happens. But
can you think of any other ones where people would react like that, like off the top of your head?
If the internet had liked Starfield better, it probably would have been that one. But
yeah, but it has to be.
I happen to be like one of the minority of people who actually like that game. So
I know your boner for Starfield. Yes.
Yeah, I haven't actually played it in like 3 months now, but that's been because of reasons.
Yeah. I'm wondering if BioShock 4 will have that same possibility, because that's happening.
Oh, that is happening. Huh.
But BioShock doesn't have. I mean, its third game, like we just said, was well over a decade ago. So
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, there you go. So it's 12 years ago, and I don't know if that's coming out this year or when that's coming out. I don't know if it has that kind of pull anymore where people would really care. That's why this is a struggle, because like I sit here and I go, yeah, I'm the Shenmue super fan. Of course, to me, if Shenmue 4, blah blah blah, I'd be annoyed. But that's not like a mass pop culture game.
No,
that's
like
the problem.
You would be annoyed because you would be getting Shenmue 4 physically, and you want to be able to get it early because you'd be getting it physically.
Yeah, but that's just me personally. What I guess I'm trying to say is there is a very finite amount of games where knowing the ending of the game would matter to the mass audience, just because it has to have gamer appeal, it has to have mass wide appeal to the casual gamers, it had to have been a big hit, and it had to have been driven by the narrative, not just the gameplay. And I'm being serious when I say that off the top of my head, the only game that I think has that kind of pull at this point would be a hypothetical Last of Us 3. Unless maybe a new Zelda, but like even then, I don't really hear people talk about Zelda's story all that much.
Yeah, like the thing is that with Zelda, like no matter how good it is and like how fun it is to play and experience stuff, like unless if you're like super hardcore anti-spoiler, like I don't want to know anything about it. You know the game's gonna end with Link stabbing Ganon with a sword, or whoever's in Ganon's place if it's one of those games where Ganon's not actually there, like, or some variation of that.
Exactly. So like, there's not too many games that have a deep enough story where I think people get that attached. I guess that's where I'm going with this. Is that yeah, I really kind of, unless I invite everybody in the comments to be like, well, what about this? And I'll be like, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, like maybe if it was 2 games ago, Final Fantasy could be like that, but I don't actually remember what the reception to 16 was. But
do you think that this would? I'm going to throw one out there. It's obviously a curveball, and it's a ways away, obviously. Do you think Elder Scrolls 6 would have that impact?
Huh.
Because, like, the thing is, obviously, the last one we got, like, legitimate one, Skyrim, we all know that. Dude, that was 2011. That was 14 years ago. But even I, as a casual, before I've never actually played Skyrim, but I worked on a show called Skyrim for Pimps, so I had to be very familiar with the game and, like, everything. But even before that point, I understood that there was like this big storyline of these warring factions, and you as the Dragonborn had to do this and that, and you pick a side, etc. Like even I knew that the basics of that just casually. And I'm wondering if Elder Scrolls 6 would have the same possibility, especially if it was hidden behind some sort of timed paywall, if you want to call it that.
Probably not, if only because if they follow like what they did with Starfield, you won't have you reasonably won't have enough time with the way that most people play a game like Elder Scrolls or play Starfield, where you're going around trying to do everything. By the time you reach the end of it, by the time you should be reaching the end of the game, you've been playing for like at least like 60 hours or so. So, I mean, maybe if you no-life the game, but, like, it's really going to depend. And honestly, like, after the initial reception of Fallout 76 and how people still are talking about Starfield to some in like casual conversation, I think more people are probably, when they get Elder Scrolls 6, they're probably going to be making videos about how it sucks, and no one's going to care.
All right, that's fair. Well then, okay, I invite this open to everyone in the comments. What game do you think would have that kind of potential where it being behind a timed paywall like that, would the spoilers of the game, particularly the story, would actually impact people? Like, and I want to be very clear on this, because if a game came out in this system, but it was like, you know, a new Mortal Kombat game, the stories in those games don't really matter. So the only things that would be quote unquote spoiled for you maybe would be, oh, you know, turns out like, Resident Evil characters are now, you know, bonus characters to play as. We had no idea. Oh, you know, but that's just like technical and information about the game, or, oh, the game is broken or whatever. That kind of stuff we know. I'm talking
the story
about
in Mortal Kombat's actually pretty in depth, but
over the
also
course
not
of the
necessarily
franchise,
good.
yes.
So,
Yeah, over the course of the franchise, yes. I know there's a lot of deep lore, I'm aware, but on an individual game-by-game basis, it's not usually anything more than like, oh, there's a tournament, let's fight. Which is fine. That's what it's supposed to be.
I mean,
I'm not...
Yeah, I mean, there's like actual plot and characterizations and plot lines going through the more recent games, but yeah.
Okay, but my point is, like, I doubt that it's that in-depth that people would, like, really lose their mind over it, unless they were, like, somehow convinced you they were permanently killing off, like, Sub-Zero and he was never going to come back ever. They did that. I mean, they technically did. Even when they did that, they just made a new guy who was Sub-Zero. That's my point.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they bring him back.
And then they brought the original one back anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it never really matters. That's why, because that plot is like a comic book. It can be constantly reset and it doesn't make a difference. Again, that's why I'm like, I think
they
that
rebooted twice in like 3 games. So
there you go. So like, I think that the only serious situation that works in is a narratively driven story where people take the narrative seriously. Again, I keep pointing at Last of Us because I think that's the only one that meets that definition of not only being driven by its narrative, but also a mainstream success. Because if you got the game 2 months early, let's say 2 weeks early, because 2 months would be a bit much, but if you got the game 2 weeks early and you were like, oh, I'm the YouTuber who made a video about it and I proved that the game was buggy, like, yeah, okay, that I'm not shocked by. That's not a spoiler. That's just that they still have work to do on it. But if you told me, like, oh yeah, Last of Us 3 ends with, like, you know, the characters, like, blow up the moon, and it's like, who knew why, or whatever, in stupid storyline, I'd be like, oh, wow, that's a weird direction for that to go. I feel like I'm a broken record here, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Okay. Well, then
I did think we were going to get a little bit more out of it, but oh well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 40 minutes.
True.
All right. So thank you very much to Sinjeet for technically not picking, but definitely picking that subject for Joseph. Joseph, obviously, thank you for picking subjects and being here as always. I also want to give shout outs, of course, to Abdullah for joining me earlier, as well as Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner. Once again, thank you to all of them. Spencer per year as well. Abdullah, Spencer per year, Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner, Sinjeet, and again, of course, to you, Joseph. Thank you so much as always.
Thanks for having me on.
Always. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for watching, everybody. As always, please do me a favor, like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, and check out all the social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, obviously, Spreadshirt, my travel channel, etc. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.